the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison, Nissen. And I am lucky enough today to have AJ Harper. AJ, welcome to the Florida Writer Podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure. I'm a former ghostwriter of personal and professional development books, and I am currently a developmental editor and publishing strategist. I wrote a book called Write a Must Read, and that book is about crafting a book that truly changes lives, including your own. And I teach a workshop for authors who write prescriptive nonfiction twice a year.
All right, let's start with prescriptive nonfiction. I can guess what it means, but let me hear your definition.
So, nonfiction book that's designed to help somebody make something better, right? Your marriage, your business, your career, your connection to God, your body, something. You want to make something better. You want relief from something. You want to learn something. You have a goal. So it's helping people learn how to do something that will make their lives better.
And so we can write our own prescriptive nonfiction using your method.
Sure. I mean, you can write your own using any method, but the method that I created is based on writing a book that puts the reader first in all decisions made about the book. So rather than focusing on your ideas, your stories, your methods solely on that, you're really focused on what's the transformation you can provide for the reader and thinking about them the whole way through so that they stay connected from you from page one all the way to the end.
Well, this is so awesome. I am all about the audience, always audience first. It's so often that you will get lost as an audience member in a work. And of course, that's when, as soon as the pages stop turning, you've got a problem on your hands. So this puts the audience first. Is it like a workbook style? Is the book that you've written, which is the Write a Must Read, is it a sort of a workbook style in that it asks your audience to ask themselves questions about their audience the whole way?
So it's not a workbook, but there are exercises in it, and they're the same exercises that I use in my workshop. It's basically a workshop in a book, as much as it can be without having face-to-face interaction and feedback from me. So I pulled the same exercises I do with my students and put them right in the book. And I love that you say audience first, because I really believe that a book is not about something, a book is for someone. And we shorten that to reader first in my class. So you say audience first, I say reader first. So I love that we have that in common. But I think you might even agree that people tend to get their reader wrong. They don't know how to think about it is the problem. And so that's what I teach in my class, but also in the book, is how to think about who your reader is and how to serve them.
I've done some ghostwriting on my own as well. And I'm really curious with your idea of reader first, but you're working for someone else as a ghostwriter. Mm-hmm. So they're the author, you're the ghostwriter, and you have to have them put their reader first. What's that conversation like? How does that happen?
This reader first craft that I developed came out of necessity, because when I started ghostwriting, I honestly had no experience writing books, and I kind of got thrown into the deep end. And I found that so many authors really had no idea how to answer the question about who their reader was. Or maybe you've heard this, it would be a long-winded answer, maybe minutes. They really didn't have the clarity. So I had to figure out a way to get the information out of them and help them home in on it, so that they actually could say succinctly, this is who my reader is, and speak with confidence about it. Because I needed that information, because how was I going to write a book for a reader they didn't even know about? So I'm really writing for their reader, but first helping them figure out who that is. Of course, I don't ghostwrite anymore. But that's how it started. I was kind of desperate, honestly, to try and get at who are their people.
Right. That's really interesting because I don't think I really focused so much on their audience as much as I was helping them tell their story, which was that in and of itself was a challenge. Now, they weren't writing the prescriptive nonfiction. They were writing more of a
memoir.
More of a memoir and an experience. So it's more of an experiential mission that they're on, and they just want to share their story to help people feel not alone. So at that point, I can see where things are slightly different, but at the same time, you really do need to focus on that audience. And it's so easy to forget when you get stuck in your own head that there's another reader out there. There's this is why there should be no such thing as writer's block, because you're always thinking about what the other person wants.
Yeah, it actually helps you to deal with writer's block whenever you're stuck. You just keep thinking, okay, how can I serve my reader? And because we get blocked when we're thinking about if everything is correct, if these are good ideas, if this is worth pursuing. But when you shift and focus on, I'm writing a book for someone, not about something, then you can just be of service. So you aren't struggling as much because it's not about you anymore.
Right. And how do you help people think about their ideal reader?
Well, number one, I try to get them off thinking about it as an avatar. This marketing term that's made its way into publishing. And so an avatar being, a person we create with all these very specific qualities, a person in their 50s who is a soccer coach and drives a Range Rover and misses their mom and goes to church on Sunday. I mean, we don't need that kind of detail. You are writing to one person. What I like to help people understand is that you're writing to hearts and minds, not the demographic. So all you really need to do is think about what your reader wants and what they perceive their obstacles are in getting it. And that could be that soccer coach, but it could also be a CEO. It could be a skateboarder. It could be a shop owner. If they all have in common this thing they want and their perception of what the obstacle is, if that's the common denominator, you can write to all of them because you're speaking to a desire and pain, and that's what they have in common.
That's really, I like how you've said that. I like to think of it as there's like three types of audiences. There's your ideal audience. That's your avatar. So I'm going to now be mindful of thinking about it as an avatar.
Ideal reader.
But you have your ideal reader. Mm-hmm. Then you have your primary audience. So the primary audience is the one that actually purchases the book, the one that reads the book, the one that consumes it, because they're not exactly the ideal reader, right? They're a bigger subset, so to speak, or a bigger set of people. But then there's that secondary audience, right? The accidental audience, the one who found your book or found your work in a different way. They just happen to be, they're at the bookstore, or they're at, they're searching for something online, and something just sort of tickles the back of their brain and says, you know what, this sounds really interesting. And even though that person's not that avatar, and it's maybe not even that primary audience, but because they're that secondary audience. So when you start thinking about it as so you have your ideal one, and then you broaden it to where it's marketable, because I guess that's the markets, that primary audience. But then you have that secondary audience, and that's where you really worry about things like language and who else might be given the book. And that's another way a lot of times your audience can grow, because people will gift a book to somebody, right? And say, you need this, or I loved this, maybe you'll like it too. That's when you start to really grow that networking. I guess that's a networking piece.
I mean, secondary audience is something that definitely happens. I also call it a peripheral audience. They just come out of the periphery, and you don't always know how it's happening. I think it's important, though, to not write to them, because they're not the ones that are actually looking for the solution, at least with prescriptive nonfiction. So, but they'll still respond to it because it's so well written toward that ideal reader. I see this time and time again. A lot of the authors I work with are surprised who's actually showing up for their books. But because it's so well written for the ideal reader, then people who come along that secondary readership or peripheral readership respond to it well. Whereas if you had tried to write for too many different groups, then it just doesn't land for anybody.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I like to, well, it doesn't matter what I think. I like to know what you think, because you've got a great.
Matters what you think, of course.
Well, I was thinking I could talk about this forever. We could just have a debate about it. But I do like the idea of focusing on the hearts and the minds.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy way to look at it, because you're not writing to, whether or not they fish on Sundays. You're writing, you're writing to the fact that they are a thinking, breathing, feeling individual. Yeah.
And then it helps you make decisions. That's the best part of Reader First, is it helps you decide, do I need this story? Okay, well, is this going to help them in some way? Is it going to help me deliver on my promise to them? If not, it doesn't go in the book. It maybe goes somewhere else. Same with teaching points, the structure of the book, if you include an intro or not. All the big decisions can be made once you have a clear vision of who your reader is, what they want, and what's standing in their way.
What else do you advocate with writing the must read?
Well, not writing fast. I'm a big believer that we can't write a great book in 30 days. We can write a first draft, but if we have done some development, we can write a first draft in 30 days if we work really hard at it. But it's not going to be a great book until we take the time to edit it properly. You know that. So I think, I'm trying to get people to see that they can write better books. They don't have to settle for something that's done fast or not as well as they hoped, or just getting something out there, which people say all the time. Their story deserves time. Their book deserves excellence and going through all the paces that are required for writing a great book. So I hope I inspire people to just slow it down a little bit.
It's like a fine wine. has to age, has to breathe a little, and we work it out that way.
Yeah, the creative process is a process.
Definitely a process. So what is next for you? You said you're giving a workshop, or you give 2 a year?
I take 30 new students a year, and I teach it twice a year. It's a 14-week class. I also teach editing workshops, and I do little things here and there, but primarily I'm focused on these 30 new students every year. And I keep it pretty small because I like to give a lot of attention to my authors.
Oh, that's really neat. How do you market? Is it all word of mouth?
I have a newsletter and event. I do webinars and events and try to build community. A little bit on social media. I'm doing this podcast right now. And of course I, work behind the scenes with different people who also serve my same type of author. So, whether it's speakers or other people that are, connected, so that I can easily be part of their world and vice versa.
I think everywhere I go, somebody says, I want to write a book. And of course, it's not that everybody should write a book. Everybody can write a book, but not everybody writes a book. And so how do you take people over that finish line?
I think a lot of people want to write a book and most people don't. And it's because the process is just too intimidating. And you really need to be strong in your sense of self to be able to complete the book. You're nodding, so I know you understand. So, perseverance to me is the number one success factor in publishing. People who stick around and keep showing up consistently, honestly, even if their work isn't the greatest, they still become successful just because they keep showing up. So I try to keep people motivated and also manage their expectations at the same time. I think that's a piece that's usually missing is we want to rah people to keep going, yay. But we also need to temper it with reality, because people quit when they realize when they're disappointed, or they realize how long something's going to take or how hard it's going to be. But if they know what they're in for in the beginning, it's easier to stay the course. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, or rather several marathons. Maybe it's more like a triathlon. But if you know that and your expectations are well managed, then you're less likely to be disappointed. If you know, hey, the first draft's going to be kind of a mess and I'm going to have to do a bunch of edits, it's much easier to finish that first draft because you don't have high expectations for it.
That's true. If somebody walks into it with the perfectionist attitude that the very first draft is going to be fabulous, got news for them.
Yeah, right. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, I don't even know how. I've written over 100 books now, some short, some long. And every single time the first draft is far from fabulous.
Well, AJ Harper, how can people find out about you and your workshop and your book?
You can get my book where all books are sold. It's the workshop in a book. So I really hope people will pick it up, check it out from their library, whatever works for them. And you can go to ajharper.com to learn more about me.
Fantastic. Are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
Do you like to drink hot beverages?
Yes, I love hot beverages.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, hot chocolate. I'm trying to stay away from sugar, but that would be my number one. Followed closely by coffee.
Followed closely by coffee. There you go. Do you have any pets?
I do. I have 2 rescue dogs. They're both pit bulls that were rescued from Brooklyn, New York, and they have a lot of mental health issues. But they're loving and sweet, and I'm happy that we have them. They're Obi and Nico.
And what is the weather outside your window right now?
It's a bit gloomy here in New York, but warmer than average.
Well, AJ Harper, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Boo! We're all done. AJ Harper is an editor and publishing strategist who helps authors write transformational books that enable them to build readership, grow their brand, and make a significant impact on the world. As a ghostwriter and developmental editor, she has worked with hundreds of authors, from newbies to New York Times bestselling authors with millions of books sold. AJ teaches her method in Top 3 Book Workshop and the Must Read Editing Workshop. She is the head writing coach for Heroic Public Speaking, the premier speaker training program created by Michael and Amy Port. AJ is the author of Write a Must Read, Craft a Book that Changes Lives, including your own. Connect with her at ajharper.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. Until next time.